Once upon a time, there was a real country within a country in Germany, Soviet military towns, closed off from the outside world. These towns were a miniature USSR, schools with education in Russian, polyclinics with Russian-speaking doctors, stores with products from the USSR and beyond, and Soviet monuments. "30 years have passed since these Soviet garrisons turned into ghost towns. How did it happen that all these towns suddenly became empty and are not falling into disrepair? After the Second World War, the Soviet Union actively built military infrastructure in the occupied territories of Germany. In total, about 40 full-fledged military towns and about 120 smaller military garrisons were created. Most often, Soviet military facilities used existing infrastructure, former German military bases, airfields, and barracks. The Soviet military towns were closed, and Germans from neighboring settlements could not enter them. A full-fledged city infrastructure was built in the military town, and German laws and restrictions did not apply there. It truly looked like a country within a country. Stationing military bases in Germany required serious funding. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union had serious economic problems. In addition, in 1990, the German Democratic Republic ceased to exist, and its territory became part of the Federal Republic of Germany. The pro-Western government in Germany, along with the United States, increased pressure on the Soviet Union, persuading Gorbachev to withdraw German troops from Germany. Eventually, an agreement on the withdrawal of Soviet troops was signed in October 1990, and the Soviet Union received a substantial multi-billion compensation for it. The last military units were withdrawn from Germany in August 1994, when the Soviet Union had long ceased to exist and these military units became part of the Russian army. Now imagine what would have happened if the agreement had not been signed back then and Russian military facilities had remained on German territory until today. What a problem that would be in nowadays reality. Today we visit several former Soviet military towns at once. Each of them has a different fate, and each has its own interesting feature. We will start from Potsdam. Here, right in the city, there was a separate Soviet quarter surrounded by a wall, with a series of checkpoints. It was the center of Soviet intelligence and security. It was sometimes called the KGB Stadt. Today it is an ordinary district of Potsdam. The wall and checkpoints are no longer there. But one building is still worth your attention. It's the former KGB prison. Today this building houses a free museum, which I recommend you visit. And not far from here is the museum in the house of the Potsdam Conference. It's very close, but outside the former KGB town. However, this museum is now closed for renovation. The next military town we will visit is located in the city of Fürstenberg. This military town housed more than 25,000 people. This is despite the fact that the population of the German part of the town, that is, what is outside of the military garrison, is several times smaller. The city also has a Soviet military memorial. As for the former military town itself, most of it is abandoned. Although many private villas has been transferred to the private ownership of Germans. Those buildings that have remained without an owner are quickly turning into a forest, just like the settlements in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. A perfect example of nature taking over is a stadium, which is now completely unrecognizable. A highlight of this place is one of the two Lenin monuments that remain in Germany. Lenin stands in the green thicket, although there used to be an open area here. Opposite the monument is an abandoned headquarters building, where some people say you can still find newspapers from that time. This building is in a very dangerous condition. It is unsafe to go inside, and you won't be able to, as all possible entrances are closed. Another garrison town is located in the city of Köthen. Legally, it's within the city limits, but in reality, it's a separate territory from the rest of the city. In the German part of the city, the part outside of Garrison, there is a monument to Soviet propaganda. As for the garrison, several buildings are in good condition because some houses were transferred to private ownership and some are used by state institutions. However, the rest of the buildings are abandoned houses. But even on them, you can sometimes see the remnants of what was here. At the entrance to the military town, there used to be a checkpoint. It has particularly disappeared. The main difference of Köthen is that this military town had its own military airfield. The airfield building is now in ruins. I risked going inside, but there's nothing interesting there, just walls and danger. The former airfield was a large open space, so today it is used for placing solar panels for a solar power plant. It's interesting that here, in Köthen, you can still see the curbs painted white, something that was common in the Soviet Union and is not seen in modern Germany. In general, the Köthen military town is also heavily overgrown with greenery, and just like in Pripyat, the former streets have become a forest. There are a lot of ruins. It's dangerous to go inside, and there's nothing to see inside because there are only bare walls and garbage. So I don't even recommend taking any unnecessary risks. The city of Dessau-Roßlau, or rather, this is the modern name of the merged city, and before that there were two separate cities, and we are now going to Roßlau. There was also a military town here, where, among other things, there was a school where the children of Soviet military personnel studied. It is surprisingly in good condition today, because a state institution is now located here. However, there are also many abandoned buildings that are now in dangerous state, although they could be used for housing or business. Sometimes you can find some attributes of Soviet propaganda, in particular the remains of information stands. A special feature of Roßlau is that there is a monument here, labeled on Google Maps as a monument to the Red Army. Note that this is a modern video, filmed by me in 2024, which means that someone is repainting and maintaining this monument. I would be very interested to know who provides the money for this. It may be a case that it's funded by local residents, because while walking here on a former territory of the military town, I repeatedly heard Russian spoken. It seems that some people stayed here to live forever. And now about the main and largest Soviet military town. It was called Little Moscow. Wünsdorf is only 25 kilometers from the Berlin city limits, and it was the largest Soviet military base outside of the USSR. As many as 75,000 Soviet citizens lived here, military personnel along with their families. Wünsdorf had all the necessary infrastructure, schools with Soviet study plans, shops, polyclinics, and cultural centers. It even had its own railway station from which direct trains to Moscow departed daily. Wünsdorf is now called the Forbidden City, because it has a large infrastructure of underground bunkers, both old ones built before the Second World War and more modern ones built by the Soviet Union. But the topic of bunkers deserves a separate video. Getting ahead of myself, I will say that there are guided tours there, so anyone who wants to can visit them today as part of the tour. As for Wünsdorf itself, although the German authorities are now actively implementing projects to develop houses that have become particularly unsuitable for renovation after 30 years, a significant part of the city remains abandoned. Although the bunker could already be considered a highlight and special feature of Wünsdorf, there is another highlight, the officer's house. It was one of the largest Soviet cultural centers outside the USSR. To Today, despite the building having an owner, it remains abandoned and its condition is rapidly deteriorating. The building is well guarded. From time to time, limited tours are conducted here, as far as I know, only in German. Opposite the officer's house stands a monument to Lenin. Its height is 4 meters. You won't believe it, but this monument is included in the cultural and historical heritage of the region Brandenburg. The guide is leading us through the territory. The Soviet military organized their own greenhouse. We see what is left of the orangery. A little further, we see a checkpoint. We also see the remains of the fence. In this part of the garrison, they repaired cars and other military vehicles. Some information stands in Russian language remain here. Nearby are garages where equipment was stored, and a few concrete flower beds, which was also typical for Soviet times, but not so typical today. We are returning to the main building of the officers' house. This building was originally the officers' club of the Kaiser's army, and in the times of the German Democratic Republic, the building was used by the Soviet army. We are going inside. There is almost nothing left inside. The corridors are empty. The rooms are empty. In this regard, everything is quite similar to the apartments of Pripyat, where there is also particularly nothing but bare walls. But as in Pripyat, even in such circumstances, you can find something interesting. A drawing on the wall, however, someone managed to draw modern graffiti on top of it. Another drawing, but in a much worse condition. And in one room, in almost total darkness, there are stands about the Second World War. I was one of the few visitors who understood what was written on them. This should not happen again. Opposite, on the wall, there is a bas-relief. It's almost impossible to take anything out in the dark, so I take a photo. In general, the atmosphere in the building is very interesting. It's a pity that we didn't have much time during the tour, because I didn't go through the whole building. We are leaving, and the tour guide is leading us to another building. On the way, we see the building from the other side, and I notice a Soviet mosaic drawing. We enter another building. We pass the changing rooms, go up to the top floor. From here, there is an incredible view of the abandoned pool. If you go down again, you can see the pipes and the water heating system. In some places there are inscriptions in Russian. Not far from the pool buildings is the Army Sports School. It played an important role in the preparation for the 1936 Olympics. We enter another building. This is a foyer where there used to be a cloakroom where visitors left their winter clothes. Then we went to the concert hall. There is very little light here. Practically darkness. It makes no sense to film with a camera. Your eyes gradually get used to the dark. Above the stage, you can see the emblem of the so-called Western Group of Forces of the USSR. Then we went to another hall. There turned out to be several of them here. A piano stands on the stage. What I saw evokes very mixed feelings. Why did all this turn out to be abandoned? Why didn't Germany as a state take over these buildings, and why are they effectively becoming ruins? Today I only told you about a few military towns. There are still plenty of them in Germany. For example, some of you might know about the huge Tropical Islands water park, which is located near Berlin. It was built inside what was once a military hangar. However, the hangar itself was built in the late 90s and has no connection to the Soviet military heritage. But everything near the hangar is the territory of the former Soviet military airfield. And next to the airfield was a Soviet military town. I didn't get to visit it, so I'm showing you Google Maps panoramas. In fact, there are still very many such former Soviet military facilities, and it's impossible to tell you about all of them in one video. Do you know about any other interesting sites that I didn't mention in this video? Write in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. See you in the next video.